Imagine commanding an empire of marble and gold, where each mansion serves as an outpost of absolute social power. Indeed, the Astors turned real estate into high art, crafting American palaces that would make European royalty question their own ambitions. Their properties became monuments to an age of unlimited possibility. Newport ballrooms that could host 1,000-person balls, Manhattan art galleries grander than museums, and English castles preserved as perfectly as fine wines. Every bronze door and limestone wall tells a story of ambition fulfilled, where American ingenuity met European grandeur to create something entirely new. Thus, in today's episode, we'll bring you the realm of America's first real estate dynasty, where architecture became the ultimate expression of power, as we take you inside the Astor family's old money mansions. First on our list of old money mansions of the Astor family is one of the last surviving Gilded Age estates along the Hudson River. Indeed, Villa Nuit stands as a monument to both architectural innovation and preservation. Originally built in the mid-19th century for French merchant Francis Cotonet, the mansion would later become home to several notable figures, including John Jacob Astor III and pioneering industrialist Amzi Lorenzo Barber, known as the Asphalt King. The villa's architecture broke new ground in American residential design. When Cotonet commissioned European-born architect Detlev Leonau to create his riverside retreat, he insisted on using French Caen limestone, shipped across the Atlantic, to achieve authentic continental aesthetics. The stones were laid with such precision that even a century later, it was impossible to slip a penknife between them. This attention to detail extended throughout the property, from its sophisticated interlocking arrangement of cubes to its low-pitched roofs with overhanging bracketed eaves. The mansion's south elevation features a striking three-bay facade with a central tower and balustraded balcony crowned by a hooded window above the arched main entrance. Along the east side stands an octagonal, conical-roofed conservatory added during later renovations. The west elevation, which commands views of the Hudson River, remains unchanged from its original design, preserving the architect's intended relationship between the house and its dramatic natural setting. Inside, the 14,296 square foot interior reveals the grandeur expected of a Gilded Age mansion. A central hall runs the length of the house, connecting various formal spaces, including a library with French doors and an expansive main living room. The home boasts 10 bedrooms, including 7 master suites, 9 full bathrooms, 2 half baths, and 12 fireplaces. Soaring 14-foot ceilings create an atmosphere of aristocratic spaciousness throughout. The estate's survival into the 21st century is something of a miracle. In the 1970s, when dozens of similar mansions were being demolished for condominium developments, Villa Nuit was saved through an innovative arrangement with the National Trust, which accepted the donation of development rights in exchange for tax benefits. This agreement ensured the property would remain a single-family residence, preserving its architectural integrity for future generations. Today, situated on 4.78 acres of manicured grounds, Villa Nuit continues to embody the elegance of America's Gilded Age while adapting to modern life. A heated gunite swimming pool and updated amenities complement the historic structures, which include a 1,200 square foot carriage house with 3 bedrooms. The property's endurance stands in stark contrast to the fate of its neighbors. Of the original 40 to 50 estates that once lined this stretch of the Hudson, Villa Nuit remains one of the few survivors of a vanished era. The Gilded Age reached its apotheosis at Beechwood, the magnificent Newport mansion that William Backhouse Astor Jr. acquired in 1880 for $190,941.50. Under the ownership of Caroline Astor, known simply as the Mrs. Astor, this architectural masterpiece became the epicenter of Newport's social scene. Between 1888 and 1890, Mrs. Astor commissioned renowned architect Richard Morris Hunt to undertake extensive renovations, investing what would amount to over $56 million in today's currency. The renovated mansion's crown jewel was its grand ballroom, specially designed to accommodate 400 guests for Mrs. Astor's famous 400, the definitive list of New York society's elite. Hunt's masterful redesign included an expanded dining room capable of seating 200 people, creating the perfect stage for Mrs. Astor's legendary dinner parties. The mansion's music room showcased exquisite wallpaper imported directly from Paris, while its well-appointed library served as a refined retreat for the family and their distinguished guests. An ornate, arched loggia overlooking the cliff walk provided spectacular vistas of the Atlantic Ocean, combining architectural grandeur with natural beauty. The mansion's exterior was enhanced with the addition of a balustrade along the ridge of the mansard roof, while the interior gained a glassed-in palm court that brought the outdoors in. For 8 weeks each summer, Beechwood transformed into the undisputed center of Newport society, with Mrs. Astor's annual summer ball marking the absolute pinnacle of the social season. The mansion's 16,400 square feet of living space provided an appropriately grand setting for these celebrated gatherings, which defined American high society for a generation. In recent years, Beechwood has entered a new chapter in its storied history, having been purchased in 2010 by Oracle Corporation co-founder Larry Ellison for $10.5 million. Ellison has committed to a complete renovation of the mansion, aiming to restore it to its original 1881 grandeur when Richard Morris Hunt first transformed it for the Astors. Plans are underway to convert the mansion's first floor into the Beechwood Art Museum, which will showcase Ellison's collection of 18th and 19th century artwork. The restoration project demonstrates the enduring appeal of Newport's Gilded Age mansions, as modern stewards work to preserve these monuments to America's golden age of architecture and society. As impressive as Beechwood was, it represented just one facet of the Astor's remarkable real estate portfolio, which extended from Newport to New York City's Fifth Avenue, where the family maintained several equally magnificent urban residences. In the 1880s, Caroline Schermerhorn Astor cemented her position as the Grand Dame of New York society from an understated mansion that belied her incredible wealth and influence. The house at 355th Avenue, situated on the southwest corner of 34th Street, was built in 1856 on former farmland owned by the Astor family. The property was a wedding gift to Mrs. Astor and her husband, William Backhouse Astor, marking the beginning of what would become the city's most important social address. The exterior presented itself as a plain 4-story townhouse measuring 50 by 107 feet, with Nova Scotia freestone used in window dressings, architraves, cornices, Corinthian columns, and a distinctive double stoop. A fenced-in garden on the left side of Mrs. Astor's house was shared with the neighboring residence of William's brother, John Jacob Astor III, creating an Astor family compound in what was then the most fashionable residential area of the city. While the exterior maintained a relatively modest appearance, the interior was a different story entirely, designed to dazzle the cream of New York society. Guests attending Mrs. Astor's annual January ball would enter through a wide hall, proceeding to the first of 3 connected drawing rooms, where their hostess received them while standing before her life-size portrait commissioned from the celebrated painter Carolus Duran. Beyond the drawing rooms, visitors would find themselves in a spacious art gallery that doubled as a ballroom, where Lander's orchestra would play from a dedicated musicians' gallery while priceless artworks adorned the walls. The grand dining room featured an immense table, where elaborate suppers were served to the city's elite, while the upper floors housed separate bedrooms for Mr. and Mrs. Astor, along with spaces for their 5 children. The mansion's reign as the center of New York society came to an end in 1893 when Mrs. Astor's nephew, William Astor, demolished his father's neighboring brownstone to construct the towering Waldorf Hotel. For 1 year, Mrs. Astor attempted to maintain her social schedule alongside the hotel, but the changing character of the neighborhood and society's northward migration ultimately proved too powerful to resist. By 1894, plans were announced to replace Mrs. Astor's beloved mansion with what would become the Astoria Hotel, completing the famous Waldorf Astoria complex. The demolition of 355th Avenue marked the end of an era in New York society, as the site of countless elegant balls and dinner parties gave way to a new kind of social space. Today, where Mrs. Astor once greeted New York's 400, the Empire State Building stands as a symbol of the city's constant evolution. The transformation of the property from private mansion to iconic skyscraper mirrors the larger story of New York City, where even the grandest private homes eventually yielded to the forces of commerce and progress. Built in 1859 for John Jacob Astor III and his wife Charlotte Augusta Gibbes, 338 Fifth Avenue represented the interconnected nature of Astor family life in Gilded Age, New York. The mansion's construction began after Astor's father gifted a block off Fifth Avenue to J.J. and his younger brother William, which they divided between them. The house measured 50 by 107 feet, featuring decorative window dressings, architraves, cornices, and Corinthian columns crafted from Nova Scotia freestone. A carefully designed garden with a fountain separated J.J.'s house from his brother William's residence next door, where William's wife Caroline would establish herself as the arbiter of New York society. After 1875, cracks began to appear in the relationship between the once close brothers, a rift that would be further exacerbated by their wives' social rivalries. The family feud reached its boiling point after J.J. Astor's death, when the house was inherited by his only child, William Waldorf Astor, known for his prickly temperament. Having failed in his political ambitions and grown weary of his Aunt Lena's relentless quest for social dominance, Willie quit America for England, where he would later become the first Viscount Astor. As a final act of revenge against his Aunt Caroline, Willie initially planned to replace his childhood home with New York's largest livery stable, deliberately choosing the smelliest possible business to spite his neighbor. George Bolt, the builder of Bolt Castle, convinced William to pursue a more profitable venture, leading to the demolition of number 338 in 1891. By 1893, the 13-story Waldorf Hotel towered over Caroline Astor's adjacent mansion, serving as a permanent reminder of the family's bitter feud. In 1895, George Bolt orchestrated another masterful negotiation, convincing Willie's first cousin, John Jacob Astor IV, to demolish his mother Caroline's house and replace it with the even grander Astoria Hotel. Through careful diplomatic maneuvering, Bolt succeeded in bringing the warring factions of the Astor family together to create the iconic Waldorf Astoria Hotel. The combined hotel complex operated until 1929, when it was razed to make way for what would become one of New York's most recognizable landmarks. Today, the Empire State Building stands at number 338 Fifth Avenue, its soaring height a far cry from the elegant mansion that once housed the Astor family's domestic dramas. The transformation of the site from private residence to luxury hotel to world-famous skyscraper traces the evolution of New York City itself, as family feuds gave way to commercial enterprises that would reshape the city's skyline. In 1893, an escalating family feud triggered a chain of events that would lead to the creation of one of Fifth Avenue's most magnificent double mansions. After William Astor demolished his brownstone to build the towering Waldorf Hotel next to his Aunt Caroline's home, she held out for a year before finally conceding that her reign at 34th Street had ended. Caroline's son, Colonel John Jacob Astor, commissioned Richard Morris Hunt to design an immense French Renaissance chateau at 65th Street that would house both himself and his mother. The double mansion was constructed to appear as a seamless unit, with John occupying the more desirable southern half at number 840, which offered additional windows along 65th Street, while Caroline took up residence in the northern section at 841. Guests entered through magnificent bronze entrance gates into a glass-domed entrance hall, from which they could proceed left or right into the separate residences. Hunt's genius for awe-inspiring interiors was on full display in the combination ballroom picture gallery, where a massive fireplace featured enormous carved female figures flanking an inset oval portrait above the mantel. Following Caroline Astor's death in 1908, John Jacob Astor wasted no time in taking over his mother's half of the house, removing the twin staircases and installing a bronze-domed reception hall. The renovated mansion reached new heights of splendor with the installation of an immense fountain built of shaded grey convent marble, standing 10 feet high and featuring spouting dolphins and infant Neptunes with tridents seated below, ready to spear goldfish swimming at their feet. Tragedy struck in 1912 when John Jacob Astor perished aboard the Titanic, leaving his young pregnant widow Madeline to give birth to their son in the mansion that August. Vincent Astor, John's son from his first marriage, inherited the property and moved in with his wife Helen Dinsmore Huntington, transforming the house from a bastion of old society into a centre for progressive causes. Under Helen's guidance, the mansion hosted unprecedented gatherings, including meetings of the League of Foreign-Born Citizens and the Maternity Centre Association, marking a dramatic departure from Caroline Astor's purely social entertainments. Less than 30 years after the Bronze Gates first opened, the mansion's demolition was announced, marking the end of an era in Fifth Avenue's history. In 1926, the American Art Association orchestrated a public auction of everything from Mrs. Astor's silver and china to the very architectural elements, including carved wood wall paneling, painted insets, and ceilings. The massive French chateau that had served as the epicenter of New York society was replaced by Temple Emmanuel, designed by Robert D. Cohn, forever changing this stretch of Fifth Avenue. Today, while the mansion itself is gone, its legacy lives on as perhaps the grandest of all Astor family residences, representing both the pinnacle and the passing of Gilded Age New York. While the Astors dominated American real estate, their most romantic acquisition may have been Hever Castle, the 13th-century English estate that once served as Anne Boleyn's childhood home. William Waldorf Astor, who had become America's richest man upon inheriting his father's fortune in 1890, purchased the historic castle in 1903 for £10 million, equivalent to over £1 billion today. Having relocated to England in 1891 with a reported fortune of $100 million, Astor saw Hever Castle as his opportunity to establish himself firmly within British society. Between 1903 and 1908, Astor embarked on one of the most ambitious private restoration projects of the era, employing 748 skilled craftsmen, including plasterers, carpenters, stonemasons, and metal workers. Under the guidance of architect Frank Loughborough Pearson, Astor meticulously preserved the existing castle structure, replacing doors, windows, locks, and glass with materials that matched 16th-century construction techniques. The project's grandest addition was the Tudor Village, now known as the Astor Wing, a 100-room Tudor-style extension that seamlessly complemented the original castle. Astor transformed the grounds by creating 125 acres of classical gardens and natural landscapes, including the construction of a 38-acre lake. While honoring the castle's medieval character, Astor discreetly modernized the property with central heating, a power station, and a private water supply. Today, visitors to Hever Castle can explore Anne Boleyn's and King Henry VIII's bedrooms, furnished as they would have been during the Tudor period. The castle houses a magnificent collection of Tudor portraits, while the Astor Suite showcases more recent history through carefully preserved family memorabilia. The Italian garden stands as perhaps Astor's most personal touch, housing his collection of ancient Greek and Roman statuary amid meticulously designed landscapes. Modern visitors can experience both the castle's Tudor heritage and the Astor family's contribution to its preservation, as many areas, including the Astor Wing, are now available for corporate and private events. The restoration of Hever Castle represents the culmination of the Astor family's evolution from American new money to English aristocracy, as they became not just wealthy, but custodians of British history. Hever remains the most enduring example of the Astor family's dedication to architectural preservation, a trait that would influence their approach to properties on both sides of the Atlantic. This medieval castle, transformed by Astor wealth yet preserved in its historic character, stands as the final chapter in the family's remarkable story of real estate acquisition and stewardship. And now, we'd love to see you in the comments. Which of these mansions of the Astor family is your favorite? We look forward to hearing your personal taste below, so let us know. With that said, thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Mansions, and cheers until next time.